Virtually every successful writer I've interviewed has an agent, but not every writer-agent relationship is a healthy or successful one. How does an aspiring writer find an agent? What's a healthy writer-agent relationship look like? We'll find out as we visit with a mega best-selling author and his agent on this edition of The Inside Story.
Welcome to another episode of The Inside Story, exclusively on Liftable.tv. They say everyone has a book in them, but turning that desire into a compelling story can seem overwhelming. That's where The Inside Story comes in. Your host, Walt Larimore, is himself an author of over 40 books. Walt's goal in every episode is to inspire and entertain you by spending quality time with best-selling authors and having conversations about the art and the heart of writing. In this episode, you'll be encouraged and equipped to lean into your own writing dream and pick up some insider tips and tricks of the trade. Grab a cup of coffee and get ready for The Inside Story on Liftable.tv.
Hi, I'm Walt Larimore, and I'm happy that you're joining me for The Inside Story. Returning to visit with me is a man who was our very first guest on this show. He's the author of 200 books with more than 71 million copies sold, including 21 New York Times bestsellers. And also with us is his literary agent, who is the founder of the Bindery Agency, which he started in 2017 after over 20 years working in book publishing and journalism. Jerry Jenkins, Alex Field, welcome back to Inside Story.
Thanks, Walt.
So we're going to talk about agents and authors, and you guys have that relationship. But Jerry, I think the story of how that, because you've had other agents, but the story of this agent is particularly interesting to me.
Yeah, I was between agents, and I happened to be reading Writer's Digest magazine. And I see this story from an agent who's talking about his time as a publisher and an editor. And the story was about what goes on behind closed doors in the big publishing houses with the editors. And that's a mystery to all of us, even now, even with all the books I've done. You'd love to look over their shoulder. And it was just a really captivating, compelling piece. And I didn't think it was like telling stories out of school. It was just simply, here's what we're looking for, here's what we do, here's what comes next, talking about the publishing board and that type of thing. And then I saw that he said he lives on the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, which is where I live. Mm-hmm. And I thought, does he really live in Colorado Springs? So I just made the contact and found out he does indeed live in the same town I do, and invited him over to chat, and the rest is history. We hit it off, and we've had some really fun projects.
So Alex, you've been in the publishing business forever. I mean, in a whole variety of different roles. You know that from the inside out. Decide to get out and help writers and start an agency. It's tough starting a business anyway. And then you're getting it going, getting it started. You move your family, start the agency, and then somebody that's written a couple hundred books calls you.
Yeah.
I imagine it's unbelievable almost.
Yeah, I started out, I left really what I thought was my dream job as publisher at Penguin Random House for several imprints. And I'd been there a few years. We'd had major success, but I realized I wanted to work for myself and I wanted to get closer to words again. I wanted to serve authors directly. And so I told my wife, and I'm surprised she even went along with it, I want to start my own business and leave this high-paying corner office job and start something new, brand new. And I had no authors signed at all. So I started the business in 2017, and I think in early 2018 or maybe spring 2018, Jerry and I connected after I wrote the article for Writer's Digest, and I went over to his house, and we just had a great time talking. And it was honestly, it was a gift from God. I'd been praying about this business. If you've ever started a business, I'm sure you have, there are moments where you're on the floor, on your knees, God help. I need your help. It's just me. If I don't make this work, my family won't eat. So I had done some great book deals and had some fun early on, but connecting with Jerry was a gift, and I've learned a lot from him in the time we've worked together the last few years.
Jerry, you're at about 200 books, but you didn't have an agent for a long time. What, 90-ish books?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, back in that time, the inspirational publishers were very suspicious of agents. They were big in the general market. In fact, I'd done a few general market books Or they said, who represents you? And I said, I do, because I'd been in publishing. I'd negotiated all my own contracts. And that wasn't easy. I didn't like doing that. I could negotiate for somebody else, but to say, no, I need more, or I think this should be different. And I didn't negotiate every clause the way these guys do. Basically, it was the advance and the number of free copies and that type of thing. And but New York publishers would say, we want you to have an agent because we don't want you to come back later and say we took advantage of you. Mm-hmm. And they said we wouldn't do that on purpose, but we might because we're looking out for, our lawyers are looking out for us. And so they would basically say, talk to this or that guy. And so I would have an agent for a book or two, like some of the big sports biographies I did. The agent for the player might serve as agent, And I learned a lot from those guys. But then when I always thought it'd be really cool to have an agent, but they simply weren't accepted in the inspirational market at that point. And I even had publishers say, if you come to us with an agent, we won't talk to you.
So that was like the early 1800s, 1820, 1830. Let's fast forward now into this century. Can an author afford not to have an agent if they want to be published? Self-published, a different deal. But if you want to be published mainstream, Alex, what would you say?
Yeah, I'm a little bit biased, of course, being an agent, but having been on the other side and seen, I don't think publishers are trying to take advantage of authors. However, they're beholden to their shareholders or the family who owns the company or whoever the publisher is first. So I would say an author needs an advocate, especially for those contractual negotiations, someone who can get in there and really fight for what the author wants and negotiate every clause. And so I think an author who wants to make a career out of writing needs an agent. And to Jerry's point, every New York publisher that I've either worked for or worked with, they don't demand an agent, but they don't like to work with authors without agents involved. The inspirational market is pretty common now for everyone to have an agent.
Jerry, you teach tens of thousands of writers, and you have for years. If a writer in your guild or writer that's learning from you says, I think I'd like to go without an agent, if I was that person, what would you tell me?
I would say you can do it, and there are a few publishers who'll still talk to writers without agents, but most of the big ones won't. They'll say you really need to have somebody advocating for you. And so I just encourage them to get it. I say, for one thing, it's almost as hard to get an agent as it is to get a publisher, because they're looking for the same things. They're looking for stuff that will sell and that will build a relationship. They don't want one book, a one-off. They want somebody's career so they can, make money on it and help them with their ministry. So I urge them to try to get an agent if they can.
Alex, as an agent, what do you expect from the authors you develop a relationship with?
I think the best thing that we see from the authors we serve that are most successful is engagement. I mean, you'd be surprised how many times an author will, write a manuscript and sort of hand it over and not want to get involved beyond that in a project. I think an author should be engaged and be passionate about sharing the story or the message with the world. And that's not to say that all the marketing has to land on the author, but marketing these days is a lot about author involvement. And so I would say, certainly we look for beautiful writing. We look for someone who can create a stellar manuscript, but the other half of that process is getting out there and sharing the book with the world. So we look for authors who are engaged in the whole process.
Jerry and I have a mutual friend, a well-known author, who believes that's not his job.
Yeah.
His job is to write, and that's it. And when he's done writing, it's up to the publisher to do it. And he's a wonderful writer. He's exceptional, but he doesn't sell. And I'm getting the sense that what you're saying is true, that writers have to be involved with the publisher in their own marketing. Am I off base on that?
I think so. And
You think I am off base on
that? No, sorry.
Oh.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. And publishers want that kind of relationship just as much as agents do. I work with a lot of pastors and ministry leaders where that's a little bit awkward to step into a marketing part of the publishing process. But I always talk about it as if you're passionate about the message in the book or the story in the book, then sharing that with other people, whether it's through social media or through discussing it in interviews like this one, I think that's part and parcel with the whole process. It really is. I even go so far sometimes to say, when there are people who are a little bit, they have a hard time with that, become the chief marketing officer for your own book. Like, that's okay. That is part of the process. Now, the publisher should definitely be leading the campaign, and there are a lot of expectations that I throw on the publisher on behalf of our authors as well. And that's super important. But marketing is hard, and it's a team effort, absolutely.
Jerry, what should authors expect from their agents?
Well, engagement is a great thing. I want the agent to get me, to understand what I'm doing, and like my writing. One of the things that, on this same point of what an author should do in relation to the publisher, I like to please the publisher. I want to be thought of as one of their favorite guys. Besides just selling for them and making them money, I just want to help them compete in the marketplace. And so I like to say to publishers, here's how I would reach my constituency. Here's what communicates to them best. And here's what I'm willing to do. And basically, that's anything you want me to do. You want me to do interviews by phone, come to Walt's house and be interviewed on camera, whatever. If I'm available, I'll do it. That's what they're looking for. And they've got enough authors who go, oh, you just handle it, I'll just write. The next time they have a big project and they want somebody for it, they're going to look to the person who cooperated with them the best, especially in the area of promotion and advertising.
To both of you, what are the hallmarks of a healthy agent-author relationship?
I work with a lot of clients, and I think it's different for every author and every agent. But certainly clear communication, I think engagement, we've been using that word. And Jerry's unlike a lot of authors. He's very prolific. He's writing every single day. And so there's always more for us to talk about, which is really, that's an exciting thing for an agent, to have more fun projects to work on. So that for me is very healthy. There are some authors who write one book and they have a really important topic they want to write about, and that's the only book they'll ever write. And that's fine. It's not an unhealthy relationship. But I've seen it go sideways with some in other agencies. And as long as we're communicating and sharing our goals and we're on the same page, I think that's a healthy relationship.
I feel valued at the bindery. And I, of course, have access to the founder of the bindery. He's my agent. I realize that part of that is what I bring to the table. There's value from me to the agency. So I don't want to overdo that. I know people who would call their agent and say, I'm feeling depressed today. I just need to have lunch so I can feel better.
They do that in the movies.
No, they always do, yeah. And the agent, hires somebody to come help them and all that time. I know that I have access to Alex. I don't want to take advantage of it because he's got plenty of clients. And, even if I was the biggest client in the whole place, I'm not sure I am, but I know he'd take my call. So I want to be careful about what I expect from him too.
I don't know how many movies I've seen, maybe 2 or 3, where the agent takes the book, reads the whole thing in one night, is crying the next morning, and calls the author back. And you guys read the whole book overnight and cry the next morning?
I don't think I've ever read the book in one night. No, never. I'll just say that.
That would make him cry in the movie.
Right. Or his wife would cry.
But yeah, when an author turns in a book, sometimes that editor-author relationship is very important, and the editor's kind of focused on that part. But when an author turns in a book, it's a special moment, it's a special day, and it's always fun to read a new manuscript. That's why I'm in this business. That's why I started.
Do most agents read the whole manuscript?
We try to, but I don't know. You'd have to ask most
So that
agents.
would not be unreasonable to expect an agent to actually not just pass it on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then when it comes to shopping books, how does an agent and author work together as far as what publishers and that sort of thing, Jerry?
Well, that really does fall more on the agent. Now, I may tell them, I happen to know so-and-so at this. I mean, the funny thing with me, and maybe this doesn't apply to everybody watching, but I've published more books than most of the editors we work with, So I know everybody in the business, but so does Alex. So I don't need to tell him who's the editor at Tyndale or someplace else. But I may say, I had a discussion the other day with so-and-so, an old friend who's now the publisher at such and such, and he'd be interested in this. I think that's just a helpful thing for them to know.
Has such and such sold very many books? Or?
Matter of fact, they have.
Alex, what would you say?
What was the question again?
It was a good question. Whatever it was, I forgot.
He's asking two senior citizens what the question was.
There's 3 signs of old age. The first one's you lose your memory, and the second one, I don't remember. No, as far as finding publishers.
Yeah.
How do you shop a book?
Yeah. That whole process starts with a book proposal. In fiction, for first-time authors, a full manuscript is required. That's not always the case with a veteran author who's written many books. We spend a lot of time shaping that proposal and making sure that the proposal represents the book that the author ultimately wants to write. And then we think about, all right, who are the key people at the publishing companies that would be right for this book, that would read it and love it? And we'll build a strategy for that list of people. And sometimes that consists of face-to-face meetings first, and then we share the proposal or the manuscript. Sometimes we'll prepare a video or design something special to send. Ultimately, I used to be that acquisitions editor, that publisher receiving proposals. So I want to arm that person with all the information they need to make a healthy publishing decision. And then, of course, I want to share my vision for it and why I think this is going to be an amazing book. So that's kind of the strategy and how we approach publishers. It's different for every book and for every author. But ultimately, we're trying to find someone who will fall in love with this book and want to take it to their team and to the world.
Alex, the proposal that goes along with the manuscript or the sample chapters, do you find that as an agent, you'll tailor that to the separate, you don't send the same proposal to every publisher, you tailor it?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes we will tailor it. It depends on the book. But if we know somebody wants something specific and the book is offering that, then sometimes we will make that, we'll highlight that particular element of the book proposal. And a proposal, you know this well, I mean, it can be 20 pages, it can be 70 pages. They vary depending on the project we're sharing. We spend a lot of time shaping that, shaping the title that we're sharing, the subtitle, the summary information. And we even share lots of different marketing ideas for what could potentially sell this book once it's time to put it out in the world.
Kind of looking for that win-win, Jerry.
You'll know, too, if an editor has had success with a certain type of book.
Yep.
You say, because you published this one, we wanted to show you the new one.
That's right.
And they like that kind of attention because somebody's noticing what they've done. And plus, you're right. If they like that book, they're going to love this book, so let's go.
Often young writers will ask, do I have to have an agent and an attorney? Or does the agent, even though not an attorney, or at least most agents aren't, have enough experience to be able to handle kind of the logistics?
Logistics.
Is legal and logistics, logistics?
Logistics. One thing you want to be careful of is getting an attorney involved unless you've got a legal problem. Because, and I love attorneys. I have them in my family and I have people that I respect, but they're looking at a contract differently than a literary agent does. Literary agent is negotiating every clause for my sake or for the sake of the author. An attorney is looking at every word and pushing into questions that have been already answered. A lot of things go without saying in the industry. We've done it this way for years. It works. It's fine. That's not an issue. But they want to change, the wording of contracts from now and forevermore. Generally, an attorney can really be helpful. As I say, if you get into some sort of, somebody brings action or there's libel or whatever. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, agents can handle it. And the publishers, they have their own attorneys if they need them. But usually they just let the editorial staff work with the agent on that.
Alex, as an agent, if you run into something that you think is legal, I suspect that's unusual, but then would you recommend to an author that we get someone involved?
Absolutely. Yeah. If they feel comfortable getting their lawyer involved, we always say, please do. Get them involved. I'll talk with them. I'll walk them through the contract if that's necessary. However, I think Jerry's right. I am not a lawyer. I'm a literary agent, but I have negotiated at this point now thousands of contracts, and I've seen every publisher's version of the same clauses, and I know what they mean from the publishing side and why they're author friendly or why they're publisher friendly. And so I'm on the lookout for those things every time it comes time to negotiate a contract. However, there are those unique circumstances where we need legal advice, and we have a lawyer, and certainly we recommend that our authors consult their lawyer as well.
We've got people that want to write or early in their careers that are probably watching. What are some of the, imagine I'm that early writer, what are some of the mistakes that people like me would make? Alex, what do you see among first-timers?
Yeah. The mistake that I see often is when a first-time author, maybe they're out there speaking somewhere, maybe they're blogging, maybe they're doing some really interesting work, and they're starting to get some attention for it. And the first editor that calls them makes them an offer to publish the book, and they accept it without even thinking about it, and they just go for it. And then a year later, or sometimes 18 months later, the book comes out, sells 250 copies, and they're like, what happened? All the things that I dreamed about for this book didn't happen. Like, what went wrong? And that happens so many more times than I can count. And it's not to say that they need to go out and get an agent right away, but slow it down, take your time, and, consider the other options in the marketplace, whether that's looking for an agent or talking to other publishers. I always recommend don't hurry into this process. Once you put a book out there into the world, it's on the bookstore, the bookshelf at Barnes & Noble, hopefully for decades, right? And if you hurry up the process at the front end, you might be disappointed with the outcome.
Jerry, you teach tens of thousands of young writers who ask you that exact question.
Yeah, the biggest mistake I see is that an author might get interest from an agent, and they say, well, I can't wait to get back to him because I have 10 good ideas. I've got 10 books that would just be perfect, and I've got this series, and I'm writing the third one now, and I say, look, it's hard to get the interest of an agent. If you've got the interest, give them your one most passionate project. And if you can't decide, take a day and just prioritize. If you could only sell one, if there's one book that would keep you up every day writing at the keyboard that you're most passionate about, that's the one you want to. And then once they do that, and they like it, and they shop it and get you a sale, then it's time to say, what else have you got? And you've got them all lined up. Publishers love series because they get more bang for their buck. Agents love them because it's a longer relationship. But don't empty the trunk of everything you've ever thought about and wanted to write on the first time.
I don't think it's rare for young authors, new authors, to see their first book cover that comes from the publisher. And it's also not rare for them to hate that book cover because it's not what they imagined. How do you negotiate those waters? I mean, here you've got a publisher with an art department and with experience in the business, and they don't just, it's not just willy-nilly a cover. But then your author calls you, Alex, and says, I'm out of this deal. How do you negotiate that?
I've gotten that call. Yeah, many times. It's surprising how subjective the cover design process is and how often, let's just say, the publisher and the author have a different vision for what the cover should look like. If it's the hill to die on, and I'll have that conversation with the author, is this a major important deal? If it is, then I'll go to the publisher and negotiate for, first of all, more designs. Every publisher creates a number of different options for the cover. Sometimes we've gone as far, and this has happened more than once, we'll hire our own designer and sort of ask forgiveness, not permission. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying sometimes we've tried that and wound up with something favorable to both sides. I think that old saying, you can't judge a book by its cover, is sort of I'm not sure it's true anymore. A lot of people do judge a book by the cover these days on social media or elsewhere. So that's the important first impression for the world. So I take time to really give that a lot of importance in our discussions with the publisher.
Jerry, young writers, I think, are often surprised that the book doesn't go through one edit. It may go through 5 or 6 or 7 edits, and then you finally get the page proofs or the galleys or whatever that publisher calls them. And by the 3rd or 4th time, you are sick of your own book. What advice do you give people about to forge through that long process of publication?
It's really hard. You can get to the point where you just don't need to see that, especially that opening page one more time. That's a good time to send it to somebody who hasn't ever seen it. Say, here's where we are, here's what we're doing. And they go, wow, this is going to be fantastic. And you go, yeah, I knew that. I should have remembered that, But yeah, it's just part of the deal. And when you've done as many books as I have, you're seeing the same ones over and over. You see them at every stage. The thing I think that surprised me most about the publishing industry is that you can have a book that I've done ferocious self-editing on. I submit it, sell it, they edit it, they proofread it. We've got editors and salespeople and agents and people reading it, and it'll still have a half a dozen typos in it that we've all seen 20 times.
That's right.
It's just unbelievable. So people say, well, are they going to reject it if they find a typo? Not unless it's on the very first page or the very first sentence. Your query letter should be perfect. Your proposal should be as perfect as you can make it. If you're sending them a 400-page manuscript, you can get away with a few typos. We all, cringe when we see them, but it's only those books that keep getting reprinted, and every time they fix something. Usually when they fix a typo, they enter another one, so it happens. Yeah.
That's right.
Alex, if folks want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Our website, www.thebinderyagency.com. We've got a little submission guidelines section there, and you can send us an email anytime.
And you should hear back by 2024?
That's right.
Okay. I'm just kidding. And Jerry, for writers that are looking to improve their craft or begin to write, you've taught writers for about 12 months now, haven't you?
Yeah, I think...
No, when did you start teaching?
My first computer ran on coal. I actually have been teaching writers since the 70s, so it's been a long time. You'd think I'd be better at it by now, but I make it easy for people to find me. It's just jerryjenkins.com, and we've got everything from free blogs and tips all the way up to really expensive courses they can take. There's something there for everybody.
And I want to emphasize that. I mean, the free stuff's not just a little 2 or 3 things. I mean, you literally have almost a writing course that's available to writers at jerryjenkins.com. And then through the Jerry Jenkins Writer Guild, someone that wants to go through some more formalized training, that's possible. And then you've got a new arrangement with Colorado Christian University.
Yep, they've asked me to chair the creative writing program. So they've taken the corpus of my teaching stuff from the last 6 years. Because we archive everything we do. We have new features all the time in the Guild. And they've reformatted that to work for college credit, and people can take it online. So check us out at Colorado Christian University as well.
Alex, one last thought on newer writers or those who think they've got a book in them. If you could give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say if you think that when you're older, let's say you're 100 years old, sitting on the porch drinking a lemonade.
He's talking about us,
no,
Jerry.
if you think in that moment you're going to regret not having tried to write this book or put those ideas down on paper, then just do it. Think about the one thing. Maybe it's a story. Maybe it's something you learned in your life. What's the one thing you would put on a billboard if you had a chance to show a billboard to everybody in the world? What's the one thing you would say? Put it down. Like, write it. You'll never regret it. Even if it's just for your family, like, go for it. Maybe you'll reach millions of readers. Maybe you'll reach your 25 closest friends and family, but put it down. Do us all a favor for posterity and write it.
Either way, you live your dream.
That's right.
That's what you're saying. Jerry, one piece of advice.
Well, as I always say, don't start your career with a book. That's where you arrive. Learn the craft, study it, become a lifelong learner, and the time for you to write your book will come.
Alex, Jerry, for all of us who are aspiring writers, thanks for sharing your journey, your expertise. I hope we get a chance to visit more in the future.
Thanks.
Thanks, Walt.
Before we end today's program, if you have a comment or suggestion or an author that you'd like me to interview, just email me at insidestory@liftable.tv. And in addition, if you'd like to subscribe to one of my blogs or newsletter, just sign up at drwalt.com. That's drwalt.com. And until our next episode, I'd like you to remember the words of the psalmist who wrote, "God rewrote the text of my life when I opened the book of my heart to his eyes. And may his and your writing be blessed."
Thanks for watching this episode of The Inside Story, hosted by Walt Larimore. If you have comments about the show or there's an author you'd love to hear from, email Walt at insidestory@liftable.tv.